Well, hello everyone. Thank you for joining me today. I'm Jose Ribau, a member of the Cadillac Fairview executive team, and it's my honor to have a couple of guests join us to have a conversation about a recent white paper that they put out into the market. Joining me today are Peter Missick and Amy Dick from Framework Venture Partners. Hello, Peter and Amy.
Thanks for having us, Jose.
Hi, Jose.
Awesome. Thank you for joining. I thought I would quickly start by just setting some context. CF is a proud anchor investor in one of the funds that Framework is responsible for, specifically focused on technology, AI, and fintech opportunities here in Canada. And through that relationship over the last few years, I've been quite impressed with the firm's ability to focus on key topics that are of interest to our industry. And the most recent one that came to mind was, in fact, the retail white paper published recently, Retail Renaissance. So, Peter, perhaps as part of our opening, you could introduce yourself, your role, what triggered this work, and then also introduce Amy, and then Amy can do her introduction.
Awesome. So I'm a partner and co-founder of Framework Venture Partners. Our whole reason for existing is we want to help build world-class companies. And we think the way to do that is to get as intelligent as possible in sectors that are seeing significant disruption. And prior to the pandemic, the retail sector was experiencing what we thought was a tectonic shift in consumer behaviors, in trends, in every possible aspect of its business model, which for a technology investor creates a lot of opportunity. Then the pandemic hit, and what you had was what we thought were a 10-year, 15-year time frame for retailers and all their partners to adapt, basically truncated into what we think will be a 12 to 24 month sprint to reinvent themselves across what we think will be 5 key issues: omnichannel, data and artificial intelligence, omni-delivery, engagement and experience, and brand value.
So, with that as a start, it sounds like you brought on some great talent to help you. Amy, perhaps you can tell us a little bit about yourself, your role in the paper, and then I'll also be asking you a startup question.
Sure. So I'm Amy. I'm the associate on Framework's team. I joined a few months ago and I came from the capital markets side for a few years. And so when I joined, the one thing that Peter and I wanted to really start, like he talked about, is really focusing on our thought leadership. And one of the first places we wanted to start was looking at the retail space and what disruption we're going to see there. And so originally when we wrote this paper, we spent hours, months on it, and then we decided to press pause when the pandemic started to hit. And sure enough, very quickly the world changed. It essentially shut down, which had huge implications for retailers. And like Peter said, it really truncated the timelines for a lot of the trends that we identified. And so we essentially rewrote the whole thing to address it.
And so, would you say that the pandemic accelerated, amplified, changed some of your insights? Peter, right off the top, named 5 of the key insights. Perhaps you can elaborate a little bit, Amy, on how much of the pandemic have you actually embedded in some of those insights?
Sure. So I wouldn't say they really changed. It really, really just expedited it. And I guess the first insight I can dive into a little bit further is on omnichannel. And so what we believe is that the need for physical locations is still going to be there, but this really needs to be integrated into a device for really optimized presence. And this became really clear through COVID. I mean, any retailer that didn't have e-commerce really struggled. And so we're starting to see that evolve. The second insight that Peter mentioned is data and AI. And we think that the pandemic has proven even more so how important data-driven decision making can be. And the retailers that have used AI for features like optimized promotions or optimized pricing have really outperformed. And then I guess to go further, omni-delivery is the third trend. And we think that a customer really needs to be able to choose how to receive a good or service with instant options. And we've seen that again through the pandemic, and this is almost a requirement. And the fourth trend is engagement and experience. So more than ever before, we see that consumers want to feel something from their shopping experience from the retailers. And then finally, brand value. So that's the biggest trend that we identify. And that is that, the pandemic is challenging for everyone, especially for retailers. but it's really giving them a chance to demonstrate what the purpose is of the brand. And we think customers will remember this going forward.
Very good. Thank you for summarizing. I want to pick up on one point you made around the instant option. And Peter, I'm hoping you can help us understand how retailers can quickly adapt to some of these insights. I, for example, was on a call last week with Alibaba. We got a full demo of their live streaming capability where they actually have retail associates now providing not only demos in a live setting online, but also an instant option straight to cart. Now, from your experience and through this work, how can the retailers in Canada and the US adapt to these insights, and what advice might you have for them in terms of how to pivot?
Well, I think the big issue for retailers is that they struggled initially with adopting these technologies, mainly because they felt the options were unclear and or they wanted to build the solutions internally. So larger retailers struggled mightily with their internal ID departments who suggested that taking on the Amazons of the world was something that had to be done in house. And what we're learning is a partner based approach is probably the longest has the longest life cycle, but has the most benefits. And what do we mean by that? The longest life cycle is that the perfect solution to come to market isn't a reality. It's going to be a solution that from a technology perspective is a little bit hacked, but what you're providing an iterative approach to the market. So you're getting, as an example, you're getting a website up and running. It may not be hosted on the server you want. It may not have all the features and functionality you want, but you've started to expose your customer to it. And then you're iterating. You're learning from your customers as they behave, and you're bringing additional functionality and services to bear as quickly as possible. And by quickly, we mean in 1 and 2 week development cycles.
Now, clearly doing this as a retailer that's facing recovery challenges and reopening stores post-pandemic, Amy, maybe you can pick up on what Peter was alluding to there. And, from a shopping experience perspective, how realistic is it that the brand will be able to adapt to the customer need? From your paper and other things we've read, it seems like the customer preference for an omni-channel shopping experience is even stronger than it was before COVID. So, how realistic is it for them to adapt to this? And is it, in fact, the partner-based approach that you'd recommend, or are there other things that they can do post-COVID?
For sure. So the partner-based approach is probably the best situation for now. I mean, we've seen some external providers offer this type of thing, like Shopify Shop app, and then after that, we actually saw Facebook came out with its own Facebook shops that partners with Shopify as well. So there are alternatives. Unfortunately, we do think this situation may last a while. The good news is we are starting to see this reopening, but we understand that there's still practical challenges with a lot of this, including things like lineups or wearing masks. And the one thing that we really wanted to express in our paper is that human behavior has really changed, and this will affect how retailers and brands have to position themselves going forward. We do see some longer term changes, things like contactless payments. We expect that that will be very much the norm going forward, and that we'll see some upgrade cycles from POS or tills, unlike what we've seen before. People don't really want to touch cash. We don't think that trend's going anywhere. And so there's a level of patience and understanding on both the retailer and consumer side.
And so, from that perspective, when you talk contactless, obviously, our listeners would get what that means online. But in terms of omni-channel, Amy, tell us a little bit about what you describe as the halo effect that you see between e-commerce and bricks and mortar.
Sure. So we believe really strongly in the halo effect or the retail halo that we called it in our paper. And the idea behind this is that we don't think humans want to continue to sit at home and complete all their shopping online necessarily going forward. We think that the physical store shouldn't necessarily be viewed as an anchor going forward, but more like a halo, meaning that the physical presence has to be done the right way to align the brand and experience that the overall retailer is really trying to provide. So we don't think physical stores are going away. And we started to see this even before COVID. There were a lot of challenges in retail, but even the direct to consumer brands that used to just be online were moving offline too. And that's really just because the in store experience is really, really difficult to completely replicate online. And An example that we've given of this before, of a case study that really does this well, is Apple, which really seamlessly connects the retail store with its online services and online store for a really powerful omni-channel experience. And there's a ton of other great examples. Sephora is another one. Makeup is something that's easier to buy in person, but Sephora really invested in the online experience and it connects seamlessly with the in-store experience as well. So you can build your beauty bag of products online, you can try them on virtually, and then when you walk in the store, you can access the same beauty bag using the tablet or your phone. And this way, this is the halo that really allows to offer an inclusive experience across the channels and is really adding value to the in-store experience as well.
Very good insight. I want to pick up on this notion of bricks and mortar. And Peter, if I come back to you and talk a little bit about the role that landlords, including Cadillac Fairview, can play in embracing what Amy's talking about. So historically, the landlord has had and continues to have a strong, retail tenant client relationship, and we provide safe spaces and inspiring spaces for brands to present their products and services. But what can a landlord do differently in terms of helping to do more for retailers?
Well, we think that landlords play a crucial part in a consumer behavior that people are actually quite anxious to resume. So I've heard anecdotes of people going to the store for the first time in 12 weeks and actually wanting to hug the store associates because they're like, wow, this is human contact, this is interaction, it's engagement. But if we fast forward to a more normal situation, and assuming we're living with COVID for a while, it really falls on the following pillars. Landlords need to create an environment that is safe, which you described. They ultimately need to create an environment that allows the consumer to achieve what they want to achieve. And we would bucket that into, at one end, entertainment, where people shop to entertain themselves, and or two, create an instant shopping experience, an instant delivery experience. And then lastly is an environment that allows discovery. And so discovery means not just what they physically can see, but also being able to connect into the retailer systems and find products that may not be physically exactly in the store, but available somewhere in the retailer system, and being able to deliver those items again remotely or at some point in the future. So for us, it's really bringing all those things together and creating a platform for the retailer to attempt to bring themselves to the 21st century. And that this transition, while they once thought they had 10 years to make it's really truncated the timelines and made things go a lot faster.
I couldn't agree more. I think the idea of a platform from an innovation perspective and bringing technology solutions forward is certainly one that I think and believe that us and others in the industry should certainly be putting our best plans forward. Do you agree that there's a room there for technology to play a role then in providing that seamless experience, which clearly one would get when they're buying online through the various marketplaces that exist? But I sense that where you're going with this is more of a seamless bridge between physical and digital, with technology playing a big role.
Without technology, it's not possible to create that seamless bridge. And you can imagine people going online to try and buy something, especially clothing, and saying, well, I don't really know how this fits. I don't know how it looks. COVID's impacted my diet. All of these things are playing on the consumer psyche. And yet, when you're physically in the store, conversely, you're like, well, I kind of like this outfit, clothing in particular, but this color, I prefer this different color. And so the ability to blend back and forth from physical to virtual and to create that experience, that's where people win. And you can't do that without technology, and you can't do that in a way that consumers want to transact on a regular basis. The friction in any other fashion is just too high. The barriers are just too high.
And I think you've also described a good way for others to embrace the technology. But back to your point earlier, it's not always the internal resources who necessarily have the capacity, funding, or expertise to be able to stitch it all together. Yet in those same retailers and in those brands, Amy, I was going to ask you, if a brand succeeds in everything that both you and Peter are talking about, presumably there will be stronger loyalty coming out of the pandemic for brands who do this well? Because I'm assuming that certain brands who are embracing the omni-channel and some of the other insights you've mentioned will continue to see growth from both existing and perhaps acquiring new customers. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about how you see brand loyalty playing a role moving forward, if in fact a retailer does some of the things you're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. So we talk a lot in our report about how some of the things that you're mentioning that brands do now and how these will be remembered in the future. And we've seen a lot of good examples so far. And then even just to take a step back, we've seen brands give donations, shifting their production to items of for things in need like masks or sanitizers, and showing customers that you actually care is a huge way to build trust and loyalty beyond adding all these other capabilities that we're talking about. And this will translate into loyalty and retention, and then even gaining some new customers as well. I think understanding the problems that consumers are facing, especially when marketing or offering promotions, really helps to build loyalty further, along with adding personalization. Adjusting to new consumer habits is really important right now. People are prioritizing different purchases. So retailers should ensure they're offering promotions on the right items using things like machine learning or AI. There's lots of ways to do this. And just keeping the right amount of stock as best as possible to avoid stockouts. Really generating a good experience online and in store will translate into the future going forward. And a really big part of this is just to keep things simple. Simple things like a straightforward navigation on a website, simplifying the payment process, even having multiple payment gateways to help speed up the checkout process, or just the ability to be responsive online, having an online live chat. It sounds simple, and these are things that really help to build the loyalty as well and attract new customers going forward.
Well, it's interesting. You mentioned a couple of things. One, I couldn't agree more with respect to the simpler navigation and initiatives that we're working on. For example, to try and put the digital directory in your pocket to help navigate a customer through a safe recovery, because there will be some anxiety coming back. It's very important that we play those basic skills and put them forward for the customer digitally wherever we can. On the more advanced side of loyalty, you mentioned personalization. Peter, based on your experience and working in this space for quite some time, I do want to talk a little bit about privacy and whether you believe, and from the studies that you guys have done, whether shoppers are finding the balance between protecting data but also sharing data in the context of receiving benefits. Some of those benefits might be personalization if in fact it improves the retail experience. Any thoughts on how to best do that?
I think the big thing for consumers and privacy that our research is showing is a couple of tenets. The first is transparency. Tell people that you're collecting their data and tell them what you're using it for, and then allow them to consent or opt out. Those two pillars create an environment where a consumer, an individual, for the most part, and by that we mean a large majority, are comfortable operating under. And you can see that in how they embrace Amazon, how they embrace Facebook, how they embrace various physical channels, but also when they go into physical spaces and they sign up for Wi-Fi. And so you're seeing that consumers are becoming more sophisticated, but they want to know what their data is going to be used for, and they want the ability to say no.
Great point. And privacy-led innovation is certainly much stronger from a customer experience perspective as well.
For sure.
So finally, Peter and Amy, turn it over to you for any lasting impressions, any top key takeaways. Maybe Peter, you can continue, and then Amy, by all means, any final things you'd like to add.
So the first message I really want to leave retailers with is this has been a shock. And any time that you're forced to adapt to something that is a shock, your initial reaction ranges from fear to sadness and everything in between. Take the shock, take that energy, and throw it into taking a brand new approach to your customer. Figure out exactly all the friction points that they experience and start removing them. And don't be afraid to say, look, we can't do this by ourselves. We have to partner. We have to find a solution long term to deliver value to our customers, and we can't do it alone. And that realization, even for the largest retailers in the world, is tough. But it's time. It's time to get over it, and it's time to embrace technologies to change for good and an ability to make a fundamental difference in consumers' lives.
I think the one thing that we thought was quite interesting when we wrote this report was there's reports that say how retail undergoes a disruption every 50 years. And we saw this when cities led to department stores, cars led to malls, and then in the 2000s and beyond, we saw how technology really changed retail and shifted online. And originally, we thought that something like Amazon would be the latest disruption to really cause retailers to shift. And once COVID hit, we've realized that the shift goes beyond just Amazon, and human behavior has changed. And I think it can actually surprise us in a lot of ways as well. And some of the positive things we've seen from this is that consumers are actually quite willing to pay up to support local, and that's a really interesting trend. Consumers are also a bit eager to get back to stores, not everyone, but in some cases. And so as much as this has been really challenging, behavior's changing, and I think there is still quite a bit of opportunity for retailers coming out of this.
Excellent. Well, listen, I want to thank you both for your concise description of the white paper, and I'd like to encourage our listeners to download and review the paper. It's available on the Framework Venture Partners website. And Peter, I know you were going to ask me a couple of questions, so why don't I switch roles with you and hand it over to you?
I think the first question is, Jose, how are you adapting? I mean, on the one hand, I can only imagine how your business, the core Cadillac Fairview business, has been impacted. But what is the role and positioning of Ravel right now?
Well, I'll tell you, we live by a number of values at Cadillac Fairview, and the one that keeps coming to mind in the last few months is certainly engaging with empathy. Engaging with empathy across our employees, our partners, our retail and office clients, and doing what we can to really just focus on a safe, supportive recovery of our operations. Our retail business has definitely been hit extremely hard, as you've been mentioning. In terms of our optimistic view of the future, however, this has presented us with a really unique opportunity to look at what's happening in areas and jurisdictions that have come back online. And I can tell you that there's three things we're sort of looking at. One is the role of entertainment, which you alluded to earlier, and how some properties have embraced doing more of that, and that's an area that we're also going to be investing in. The second is the live stream retail and the ability to do one-click order through a device when you're physically in the building and going to the cart, the shopping cart, across a number of retailers. That's a theme that we're very interested in and seeing emerge because it allows you to still shop and be entertained, but in a social and physical distant manner. And then the final, from a development perspective, this was an area we were already pursuing, but we think will accelerate and intensify, is mixed use development and densifying of properties. So ultimately, during the pandemic, as we've all experienced, you're living, working, and playing in the same space, in the same environment. Well, our properties will continue to evolve so that we have mixed use of retail, office, and entertainment, all within close quarters, to basically provide a fuller, richer experience. So that's another trend that we're watching for as we emerge coming out of the COVID experience.
And I guess the big question for any consumers going to your properties is safety and having the confidence that they're going to be safe. That is going to form a foundation or a basis of trust that consumers are going to place in you. How do you build that and embrace the new norm?
Well, things that we may have taken for granted in the past, we no longer take for granted in this environment. So when someone walks into a property and it has clean sight lines and they're open and welcome to go wherever they wish, well, now we're actually using decals on the floor and wayfinding to help stream the flow of traffic so that we reduce the risk that you're going to bump into someone, that we encourage people to stay socially distant. We have markers all over the building to ensure that they feel comfortable. We've also done things to support the property teams. We've stood up a occupancy counter, for example, so the security guards know in real time what the volume is of visitors to the property and how close we are to the occupancy limits to make sure that our provincial expectations are being met. And then finally, wayfinding, the ability to put the directory in your pocket through apps and some of the digital work that we're doing. to really just continue to signal to clients, here's the stores that are open, here's where you can find hand sanitizer, here's a welcome opportunity for you to know how to find the face mask and put on a face mask, and what might in the past have been marketing of products and services, we're actually now going to shift that energy to marketing messages around safety and occupying the building in a safe manner. And as we're starting to see reopening in provinces that we've opened, those tactics are landing quite well with our clients, and both on the consumer side and the retail side.
It seems daunting at first, but it sounds like you're knocking them down one at a time. Which brings us to the thing that we've been struggling with as we look at retailers and their reaction to technology is, how are you going to help retailers embrace innovation and embrace that partnership? Can you help us understand how you're focusing on that, both on an investment for technology for retailers, but also on the partnership side?
Yeah, it's a good question. We are one of the groups in the company and in the industry that are able to still focus on the longer term. And by nature of our environment and ownership structure, it allows us to still place some bets in the longer term. And we believe, as you were alluding to earlier and is written in your report, that retailers do not have all the resources to be able to pivot to AI, data, omnichannel platforms. So we believe our role through the Raval business that we've established to be one of actually providing that B2B platform for retailers to take advantage of services at scale that they might otherwise not be able to afford to link to themselves or have the capacity during a recovery to build out. So things along the journey from discovery through to delivery, we're committed to offering those solutions on a platform, and that starts with our new shopping app that we're introducing this month, to then be able to partner with our retailers through to finding a product remotely, buying it directly, and ultimately having it shipped through some of our partners, which we've been piloting behind the scenes, some of that work already. So in fact, as we continue to invest, our hope is that retailers see us as having the same motivations and aligned motivations to their goals, and doing it in a way that embraces both the online and the physical retail, allows us to help the retailer maximize their bricks and mortar and maximize their e-commerce investment too. And I got to tell you, I'm very proud of the team we've put in place. We have individuals on our technology team, marketing, and the innovation teams that are from retailers, from retail consulting, from shopping cart development, payments, you name it, loyalty, gaming. And so we have experts in our team that embraced real estate as a platform, but are building out a technology platform capabilities through partnerships like nothing I've seen before. And so my hope is that retailers embrace that as well, and hear the message.
That sounds really cool. But as one retailer we spoke to, how does the rubber hit the road? Do you have any concrete examples that you can share with the audience on something that you're working on, that perhaps as it relates to contactless commerce?
That is we could spend an hour just talking about contactless commerce. I got to tell you, I mentioned Alibaba earlier in the conversation. The advances made in Asia, specifically in China, with the Alipay platform over the years, I can't keep describing it as the future because they've actually had it for a long time. But I really want, and we are working to pilot a few different options. I want to see a made in Canada, made in North America solution that allows a customer to walk into one of our properties, search for a product, one click contactless commerce with improved limits, and whether that's QR code or some other solution that allows a customer to make a purchase and walk out of the store, walk out of the property in a more seamless, touchless manner, now's the time to get that done. And I can tell you in one of our properties alone, there are 28 different types of payment terminals across our hundreds of retailers. That's just not going to cut it in post-COVID. So, a challenge that maybe you and I can both take on is, I'd love to throw this out into the tech community and say, look, we're serious about contactless commerce. I'd love to see a set of solutions. We're willing to pilot them. And I have yet to see something that works as seamless as the Alipay experience in China, where the customer experience throughout the property, throughout the store, through the device is limitless, touchless, and on the customer's terms. We still don't have that in Canada. And so the challenge is perhaps between Framework and Cadillac Fairview, we'll throw this out to the technology ecosystem and see if someone can come back with a simple, eloquent solution or help us build one. I'm very keen to accelerate this. I mean, what do you think?
Oh, we're game on. In fact, I'll tell you what, if someone brings us something that we like, we'll put it on our website, we'll host it. They get to $1 million of sales, we'll invest in it. We'll help them scale. Like, we think this is the future and we'd love to see it. So let's do it. Let's announce a challenge that we're going to build a, made in North America solution to transform what payments looks like inside a store. Let's do it.
Fantastic. Let's do it. Done. Maybe we'll
All right.
co-invest. Well, listen, Amy and Peter, I want to thank you for the natural conversation that we've had today and a lot of rich insights. And any closing comments, please feel free. But I want to thank you for taking the time today.
Just on behalf of Framework, thanks very much to you and your team, and to Cadillac Fairview. It's been a pleasure working together, and we're looking forward to many more years to come.
Thanks so much for having us.